One of the most confusing things in Pokemon is how some Pokemon look like they should be one type, but they end up being something completely different. Now yes, there is a good reason for many of these examples, but some not so much. Some Pokemon, you could argue, could even have 3 types. Hi, my name is Professor Alphalax and I like to talk about Pokemon. Today we're going to explore all the Pokemon that I think could probably have a different type than the 1 or 2 types that they were already assigned, because I think it's interesting. To start, let's talk about the most infamous example. Charizard. When looking at Charizard, you can clearly see that he looks like a dragon. But, as most of you know, Charizard is a dual-type fire and flying type, not a dragon type. Yes, he can fly, so that's why he was assigned the flying type. But if that's the case, why don't all Pokemon with wings have the flying type? Why can't Charizard be a fire, flying, and dragon type? Well, the short and simple answer is
limitations.
Ever since the original Pokemon Red and Green games, each Pokemon could only have 2 types simultaneously. I say simultaneously because technically they can have a 3rd Terra type in Generation 9, but more about that later. So they didn't have to give Charizard the flying type because, as we established, not all flying Pokemon have the flying type. Well, you might be wondering, why didn't they just make it a fire and dragon type? The most likely excuse for not doing this, though, would simply be because that would have given Charizard too much of an edge in the first generation. Being a dragon type would make it resistant to water, which combined with its fire typing would make it neutral to Blastoise's water type attacks. How unfair is that? And we might as well mention Gyarados as well. It's a water and flying type that could easily pass as a water and dragon type, but that would have given it Palkia's typing in Generation 1, and that would have made it extremely good. Charizard and Gyarados would both get Mega Evolutions later on that changed their secondary typing to be Dragon for Charizard and Dark for Gyarados, which makes sense. Too bad Mega Evolution was only a thing for 2 generations, but it seems like we may be seeing these 2 again in Legends ZA. I hope so anyway. Next up is Psyduck, and for obvious reasons. Psyduck is not a psychic type, and neither is its evolution Golduck. They are simply pure water types, which makes no sense because Psyduck are known for having intense headaches that cause it to lose control and release its psychic powers. Well, I guess you could argue that since it doesn't have any control of its powers, it's not a psychic type, but its evolution Golduck uses telekinetic powers when its forehead begins to glow. So Golduck at the very least should have been a psychic type. It can use a lot of psychic moves too. So these Pokemon on screen I don't really have much to say about other than I could see them having the fighting type as well. So since we've only talked about Generation 1 Pokemon so far, let's move on